Welcome back to the Believe in Badger Football podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, presented by betonline.ag. I'm your host, Matt Perkins, joined as always by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how are we doing today?
Man, great. Just got back from Madison, Wisconsin, the best place on earth, and now talking to probably the best lineman maybe on earth.
And someone who lives in Madison.
Who lives in Madison. Yeah, Mr. Joe Thomas. Doesn't look like a lineman anymore, though. Looks like a supermodel. Dude, you're getting younger every day. You look great, man. Thanks for joining us.
You know, I know that you're not paying me for this podcast, but you don't have to pay me in compliments. I'm happy to do it for free, my friend. I'm actually wearing my friend Kevin Euclid's beer shirt that says Jiu-Jitsu Hazy IPA, because that's the name of the beer that he makes. I think it's out in Boston where their brewery is, but I figure it'd be fitting if I'm on with the Hebrew Hammer, the greatest Jewish sports legend that has ever gone to the University of Wisconsin. And it's a true pleasure to be with you guys today.
Joe, I know we don't have you for much. First off, thank you. I know you're busy. Joe, how does it feel? So let me tell you a quick story, and then we'll jump right into you. Everyone who asks, you know, like we're older now. You don't look it, but I do. And people are like, oh, when did you play? 01 to 05. Who did you play with? So my go-to is Joe Thomas. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, Joe. Who else did you play with? And then, you know, you go down the pecking order of like Lee Evans and Anthony Davis. Like, how does it feel to be like that guy, though?
That guy that you say that nobody knows who he is until you like, well, you know, he's a lineman, and you know,
nobody knows the years. Nobody knows the years I played.
That's right.
Until I tell them that I played with you.
Oh man, it is funny you mentioned getting older and like still trying to hang around Madison and going to games and stuff and looking at those guys on the field and thinking like, when we were playing, we thought we were so big and we were so old and we were the kings of the school, and now they look like little kids out there. It's amazing. But I guess that's just part of being old. I'm sure our parents said the same thing about us when we were playing ball.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to remind you guys before we hop into it that we are presented by betonline.ag, and they are the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, events, and more, with first to market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, golf, and most importantly, college football. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, live in-game betting, props, futures, you name it, they've got it. Head on over to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to sign up and make your first wager. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BLEAV50, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Bernie, take it away. I'm going to let you start today. I'm going to let you start today.
The game starts. I'm going to start putting all my bets on Wisconsin, I think, for the first 3 games. But
Wisconsin to win. I like it.
Wisconsin to win. Joe,
and cover.
I don't know about covering. We're not very good at that. We don't have. This is not a betting or gambling. Listen, don't take my advice. The SEC is listening. I don't give any advice on any of this stuff. But Joe, first off, were you ever small? And when did little huge Joe get involved in sports and football?
Mm-hmm. Was I ever small? No, I was always a tall guy. Like even going back to grade school, I was never big. You know, it took me a lot of effort to gain weight once I got to college to play offensive line, but I was always a tall kid. I think maybe 5th grade, I was like 5'9". I was always the center on the basketball team. So I always had plenty of height. And it wasn't really until I started eating cheese curds and drinking beer at Wando's until I started really putting on some pounds and starting to look a little bit like an offensive lineman.
Dude, me too. Sadly. But Joe, when you're in high school, you know, did you start playing in 3rd grade? Did you start playing in 5th grade?
Yeah, so I started playing football when I was in 7th grade, actually, because I was a fairly decent soccer goalie up until that point, which I don't know if that counts. It's like saying I was a great football player. I kicked on the team, but I was a goalie on a select soccer team up until that point. And I always had desires and dreams to play football because a bunch of my buddies were playing 5th and 6th grade football. But I was fairly entrenched in soccer, but more than that, my mom was worried I was going to get hurt. So she didn't want me playing football until we actually went to the library. Yes, kids, there was such a thing as going to the library and pulling out books and doing old school research. And I remember going there and pulling out a book that was talking about like youth sports injuries and like the occurrences between the different sports. And it actually said there was a lot of like soccer injuries, which I feel like it was a total BS article because there's no way that soccer had more injuries than youth football, but that's what it said. And so when my mom saw that, she was like, all right, go ahead, you can play football, which the whole thing was kind of ironic. Getting into football took a lot of convincing from me to my mom because she was so worried I was going to get injured. And then I played football literally from 7th grade and through 4 years in college and then 11 years in the NFL. And I never was hurt one time to miss a game. And I actually didn't miss a snap in the NFL until my 11th season. So I'm sure, actually I know because I have seen the MRIs of my joints. I've got plenty of arthritis, but as far as like injuries that kept me off the field, I never had one until I tore my tricep tendon.
You know, I know who wrote that article. It was Barry Alvarez.
That's exactly right.
He's like, guys, soccer is the worst sport. You get
That's right.
injured every day there.
Yeah.
So Joe, when did it like come into like your mind, or like in high school, you're like, dude, I'm gonna play college football, and Wisconsin, who else was there? But like, when did Wisconsin become number one? And how did you also get Standring and all those other guys, Benny and Steve Johnson? You guys were a package deal.
That's right. You know, I told Barry, I said, I know that you don't think football is very dangerous, but I'm only coming here if I can get Paul Standring, Kenny DeBush, Steve Johnson, and Ben Strickland, who are all my roommates, all a bunch of walk-on guys, backup punters. I mean, long snappers, the most important, vital guys on any football team. I said, we can't win championships without these dudes. But back to your first question. When I first started playing, I knew I was good. Like nobody tackled me. So that's good, I guess. Like every time I touched the ball, it was a touchdown. And I had lots of tackles and sacks and stuff like that on defense. But I don't know. I was just worried about having fun playing football. Like my parents never pushed me. They never thought that maybe football would even be a gateway into college, much less a scholarship, much less a profession beyond that. I really was just trying to have fun and worried about like, man, this is awesome. And I hope my mom doesn't take it away if I get hurt. So just have as much fun as you can. And really it wasn't until my junior year in high school, I was, all conference, and I had college coaches starting to write me letters, and I started having coaches show up, and then I got my first scholarship offer, which the first major scholarship offer was actually from Wisconsin, but I think I had some smaller ones from maybe like, Illinois State, which the Badgers are playing in their opener this year. And then, some of the smaller Midwest schools, but Wisconsin was definitely one of the first schools that offered, but it wasn't really until actually after my senior year in high school at Brookfield Central that I made a decision on where I wanted to go. And really up until I made my decision right before signing day, I had visited Notre Dame, Nebraska, Virginia Tech, Colorado, Kansas. Like I visited a bunch of big schools and had talked with like USC, Miami, had a lot of offers. And I kind of expected myself to get away from home a little bit because a lot of people, especially I feel like boys in high school, towards the end of high school, you're like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out away from my mom, the discipline in the house. Like I want freedom. And the last thing I want is my parents to show up at my dorm when Matt Bernstein's sticking a beer in my hand and like start yelling at me and embarrass me in front of my new friends. I'm like, I need to get out of here. But it was crazy because after I visited all those places, I came to campus in Madison and I instantly realized that what I thought I wanted and the reasons that I thought I wanted to get away from Madison were all the reasons why I loved Madison. And I quickly realized that this was actually the place that had everything I was looking for. So it was actually good to kind of go into the process with the mindset that I was going to get away and go somewhere else and look for all those things that I wanted somewhere else, because it gave me the perspective to realize that everything was right here within my own home state, only an hour from where I grew up.
My question then is, did you question that at about day 16 at the seminary?
Oh my God. It was like day 3 when the hazing started at the seminary. No, that's like the worst place on earth. And I feel bad. Like probably someday they're going to tear it down, but I'm going to be there like cheering. I'm like, yeah, thank God, nobody ever has to suffer through 16 days of rooming with another stinky freshman, no air conditioning, no door on your bathroom, mind you. Such a small room that I could touch the wall and I could touch my roommate at the same time. And I got to be awoken every morning, not with the sun, but with the sights and smells of Danny Kaye on the shitter. It's literally within 6 feet of my hands. It was actually the worst 2 weeks of my entire life. Thank God it was only 2 weeks. NFL training camps are a lot longer, but the seminary is just a terrible place. And by the way, we were practicing for like 3.5 hours every day with Jim Huber as your coach, who is not exactly a person that should be allowed through the walls of the halls of a seminary. Not a godly man on the football field. Let's just leave it at that.
He shouldn't be allowed in a lot of places. He probably should have stayed away from elementary schools and everything. Right. Just MFing little kids for not playing on the playground right. Well, you bring up Hubes. What made you want to play for him, and what made you mentally build like walls up for what he would say to people and how he coached you? I mean, he had to have some influence.
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the big reasons that I wanted to come to Wisconsin was because of Jim Huber's history in developing offensive linemen. I mean, there's no doubt he was one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, college or NFL. Like, he just had this great habit of being able to develop young players. And we always joke that like Wisconsin didn't always get the best recruits, and Hubes took chicken shit and made it into chicken salad, because he was just such a master of taking guys that maybe weren't the best athletes, but they were tough, they were hard-nosed, and they were willing to work. And if you had those traits, Hubes could turn you into a pretty good offensive lineman, especially because they usually recruited big, tall guys, and then JD would load them up with those 1,000 calorie shakes in the weight room, and you were going to be grinding for 2 hours, running stadium steps and squatting 1,000 pounds, and you were going to put on weight, you were going to get strong, and you were going to get tough. And Hubes was going to get you technically sound, and you were going to turn into a good lineman. And he pumped out guys for almost 2 decades at Wisconsin. And so I think he had a huge impact in my own development, not only just on the field from like a technique standpoint, but I think just a toughness and like a maturity standpoint. As brutal as he was on the field in meetings, like verbally, he definitely toughened you up. He hardened you, and he helped turn you into a man. And I think those were a lot of characteristics and traits that I learned from him that I carried throughout my career in the NFL, that really, there's no doubt they helped me, because I was willing to do the dirty stuff that nobody else was willing to do repeatedly on the practice field. Not like dirty twisting ankles, but like staying out there for 3 hours and having an attention to detail and the stuff that sucks. I was willing to do that. And Jim Huber had a great quote. He always would talk about like, hey, you guys like football? He's like, how do you think we like football being offensive linemen? The only part about football that's fun is winning. He's like, it sucks being an offensive lineman, so just suck it up and deal with it. So that was really the mentality. It was like, hey, look, every day's going to suck, but if we win, it's going to be worth it. So that's kind of the mentality.
And he was right, because every time we won, it was a holiday, and every time you lost, it was like the worst day of the year. That grimy chicken on Sunday was not as good as steak and
they do a good job reinforcing that winning is important, because if you win, steak and lobster on Sundays. If you lose, it's like the chicken that they had left over at Jin's Chicken from the night before that they couldn't sell because it had flies on it.
It wasn't cooked, it had flies on it.
No, it wasn't cooked. Yeah, they didn't even get around to cooking it. It was so spoiled, they didn't even waste their time on it. They just sent it right back to the McLean Center training table.
So, Joe, when you show up on campus, you're almost, you were one of the biggest recruits. You're one of the best. Listen, dude, you are the best lineman to ever play at Wisconsin. You can say no. That's okay. I know you're humble. When did that start? Like, when did you feel like I can dominate everyone here? I feel like I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. Because Coach White would be in the offensive running backs room, and he would be like, when you go to the right, you got to read it. When you go to the left, he's like, Joe Thomas can make his block, so you know what to do. Like, he's just going to do it. Yeah. So, like, how does that feel? Like, that's so cool. Like, when does that happen?
So I always didn't have a ton of confidence, and I've always had this like heavy imposter syndrome weight on me, but I think it's actually driven me to be better, because as an offensive lineman, we're not always judged by the good things we do. Like pancake blocks are great. You get highlighted on the highlight film that goes, throughout Camp Randall and on the telecast. And, if you're lucky enough to be Outland Trophy finalist, like that's what they show at the Outland Trophy finals. But it's really not what makes you a good lineman, right? Your consistency is what makes you a good lineman. And so I think obsession with perfection and always feeling like you had to be perfect to be okay was definitely something that was always in my mind. And early on, I remember freshman year, there was another pretty good freshman defensive lineman named Jamal Cooper, who was a pretty good recruit. Actually was a pretty good pass rusher for a little while with the Badgers. And I remember going against him in one-on-ones and not really feeling confident going in. I mean, I played tight end mostly in high school. I had some coaching, but I really wasn't a lineman. They like took me at Wisconsin from a tight end and tried to turn me into a lineman. So I didn't really know what I was doing at that point. And I remember lining up against Coop, and he was super fast and he had some nice moves. And I took my set, didn't really know what I was going to do. And I just kind of grabbed him and I locked him down. And JP was like, the John Palermo, the defensive line coach, started hollering at Jamal Cooper, more swears even than Hughes somehow came out of his mouth. But we lined back up again and I locked him up again. And JP, I remember him turning over to Hughes and be like, oh, freshman might got something. So he's like, all right, we'll see what he does with Darius Jones. Darius was like the big stud defensive end. He was going to like show me a lesson. So then Darius Jones goes in there and I go against him, and he of course is going to bull rush me, right? Like, what do you do to a little freshman offensive line? You try to run him over and embarrass him, right? So I kind of knew that. So I kind of hunkered down and was able to kind of absorb the big hit and stoned him a little bit. He ended up kind of getting off late at the end, but I turned around and I remember seeing both Hughes and JP like looking at each other like, oh, he's got something, we might be able to do something with this dude. And I think it was from that point that I realized that I did belong, because up until that moment, I had that sense of like, I'm this 255-pound offensive lineman, offensive tackle, trying to play with guys that look like, Al Johnson and Jason Jowers, like 6'7", 330 pounds. And so I didn't feel like I belonged right from the beginning. But I think winning those reps in one-on-one early in camp my freshman year gave me the confidence to know that like I do belong. And if I continue to pay attention, if I continue to gain weight, and if I continue to drink those disgusting 1,000 calorie, 10-ounce milkshakes in the training room and in the weight room with John Detman, like I'm going to be able to gain some weight. And I think I may have a future here as an offensive lineman.
Dude, I just remember you in the weight room. Lifting serious weight off the ground, doing power clean, because we'd work out together because we were the strongest people. Oof. Obviously, Joe, it was beautiful to see, but how hard was it for you to keep weight on?
Yeah, it was a challenge. And when I look back on my pictures from my college days, the weight that I gained was quick weight, but it wasn't always the best weight because I was pretty sloppy in college and we didn't really have a good idea of nutrition. And this was before teams' ability to really feed players the right way. Like back then, they would give us some money to like go buy our own food or make our own food. And I think during the season, they fed us every night, but it's not like we had food available all throughout the day. And even the food they gave us was, it was like comfort food, which was great for me because I had to eat a lot of it. It was like spaghetti, lasagna, hamburgers, brats, like stuff like that, which it was good to gain weight, but not exactly good to gain like good weight and muscle and not good for recovery. So they're so much more lucky these days with how they are able to eat in their training table, but also what they're eating. So it was funny looking at pictures like towards the end of my NFL career when I'd been training the right way for a long time. I'd been starting to eat the right way, which is kind of funny at the end of my career. It took me a while to figure it out, but versus like what I looked like when I was in college, because I went from 255 pounds when I was a freshman when I got there to 285 by the end of the season. And then I was 300 before the beginning of my sophomore season. So I gained almost 50 pounds in like one calendar year. So you can imagine not a lot of muscle there, but enough to get the job done at least.
Oh man, that's crazy. So I know we have a couple more minutes, but Joe, so what, everyone knows the story of you. I mean, obviously stellar career at Wisconsin, stellar career in the NFL, but everyone knows the story about you just fishing during the draft. Was that something you're like, I just don't really, that part of football isn't me, and I just want to focus on the game, and I'll kind of separate from being in New York or wherever the draft was. And so walk us through like that kind of process and your thoughts.
Yeah, deciding to skip the draft was a combination of a lot of factors. I think a big one was just as an offensive lineman, no matter where you go, not this isn't even unique to Wisconsin. Like you're definitely it's ingrained in your brain. Like, I don't want the attention, because usually the attention at this position means you've done something really bad, like holding penalty, offsides, false start, like unnecessary roughness. They never call your name out over the loudspeaker or on TV for a good block. It's only if you do something wrong. And so I think that mentality and that sort of mushroom society thought process that offensive linemen have just causes us to be a little bit uncomfortable in the spotlight. And I was never really about like the attention or the marketing side off the field. Like I was just happy to be part of a fun team with good dudes that hopefully won a lot of games. Like that was my focus. And I also realized, like, look, I'm a lineman from Wisconsin. I'm not going to be a big marketing guy. You know, it doesn't really matter if I go to New York. And if anything, I'd rather spend this last day before I become a professional and life gets really crazy doing something that I love with people that I love, rather than a bunch of, you know, random dudes in New York City I got to hug that I don't know, that I don't have a suit, and I hate suits and I hate dressing up. And I'd rather be fishing, actually, because that's what I usually do on a Saturday. And so I remember telling my agent that, and he was all cool. He was like, "Oh, perfect. No problem. Just as long as you have a cell phone, we'll call you. It's no big deal." But the NFL, they selected me because back then they only took 5 guys to the draft. They like sort of selected me as one of the guys that was probably going to be a top 5 pick to be in New York. And up until that point, nobody had turned him down. So they just assumed like it was everybody's dream, that they always wanted to be in front of the stage with Roger Goodell, wearing a suit, putting on the hat of the new team. Like that was somehow everybody's dream. And they had a guy from the NFL who's now in the Hall of Fame, Gil Brandt. He was in charge of like calling everybody and telling them. They had him call me, and I told him that I wasn't interested. And he was like, he didn't understand. It was like I was speaking Chinese to him. He was like, what? Like, no, everyone goes to New York. Like, that's just what you do. That's everybody's dream since they were a kid. And I told him, like, look, like I told you guys, like when I was in high school, I just played football because I liked football, not because I thought it was going to take me to college. And when I was in college, I played football because it was a way to pay for my school and I liked it. And oh, by the way, I got to hang out with guys like Matt Bernstein, and they got me into parties underage. And so like these were great reasons to play football. Like, and then by the time I became a junior, they told me, hey, you could probably play in the NFL. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool if it happens. But this has never been like my lifelong dream. I always, as a little kid, was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to play in the NFL? And my mom and dad were like, that'll never happen. Like it only happens like 1 in a billion, and you're not good enough. And I was like, okay, fine. And so the whole idea of this being a dream, like not being a dream for me, was totally lost on Gil. And the first time he called, he just like hung up in sort of disbelief. And then he called back and he kind of got mad. He's like, no, you have to come. And I was like, no, I don't. Like, you don't own me. Like, first of all, I'm not even an employee of the NFL yet. I have no contract. You can't just force me to show up. Like, you're not paying me. So it's not even a job. You're just trying to offer this opportunity as like, this is the greatest thing ever. But you guys are just making the money on my name for me showing up to this thing when I'd rather be fishing with my dad. And so I ended up like calling my agent. I was kind of upset. I'm like, I don't want to go to the draft. And he's like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Who's calling you? So of course, you know, big bad agent, he's got to show Mr. Tough Guy for his client. And so he ended up getting them to stop harassing me about it. But it was crazy because there was some people from the NFL that tried to spin it like I was some diva that didn't want to go to the draft and would rather be like fishing with my dad than being on TV. And somehow that made me a diva. And they were trying to peer pressure me and like spin it in that regard, which I don't think it worked because Cleveland didn't seem to care. And it's ironic now how more people outside of Cleveland know me for being the guy that was the first that skipped the draft to go fishing with his dad than anything else I've done throughout my career. So I feel pretty good about making that decision about not going to the draft, because I think it worked out okay in my favor.
Oh man. Well, I know we don't have much longer, so I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions here to finish up. First, just quickly, Bob Bostad is back as the offensive line coach at Wisconsin. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel like the unit's going to be this year?
I'm pumped. I think he's probably the best offensive line coach in college football. He's a lot like Jim Huber. Like, he's tough on those guys. He expects discipline, toughness, hard work. He put together the best group of offensive linemen that the Badgers ever had. I forget what year it was, but they had 6 guys drafted. I mean, they had backup players being drafted into the NFL on that offensive line.
Starting that wasn't Ryan Groy. No, who was it? That was Bill Nagy.
Bill Nagy was he was drafted in like
tackler.
6th or 7th round, by the Cowboys, and I think he ended up even playing for the Cowboys for a little bit. So, Bostad's ability to develop is second to none in college football. So I think he's going to do a fantastic job. I'm really excited to watch Jack Nelson. He's their newish left tackle. He's a big dude from the Madison area. Got a chance to meet him a little bit this summer. So I'm really excited to see how those guys end up turning out, but I have no doubt that Bostad's going to whip them into shape.
Who was the go ahead, Barry.
I was to say Jay Wando. I just saw him show me the picture of you in front of the truck with Nelson.
Yeah.
That's man, how much money would you have made NIL wise?
Hundreds. Let me tell you, I wouldn't have paid for a $2 burger at Wando's on Monday
ever
night.
again.
My entire career in Wisconsin.
Speaking of Wando's, what's your favorite memory of Bernie?
Oh my gosh. My favorite memory of Bernie is probably everybody's favorite memory against Penn State, where he comes in, he's been fasting for a month because it's Rosh Hashanah or whatever. And he just is leaping over defenders like he's a little gazelle. And maybe there is something to that whole idea that if you don't eat, you have more energy, because I've never seen Bernie run so fast as his entire life.
Matt Perkins, do you know which side of the line we ran to all day long?
You guys went left side the entire
day.
Right
here.
Hey, you know what?
This guy.
If it doesn't break, why try to fix it? So
just keep doing counter to Joe Thomas. It's easy, baby.
Joe, who do you believe are the 5 best running backs in Wisconsin history?
Oh man. Okay, Rondane, obviously.
Yep.
I think Brian Calhoun should probably be in there. Anthony Davis. Oh shit, now we're running out of space here. Melvin Gordon and Jonathan Taylor. But so that's a solid group, but without looking at the full list, I feel like maybe Brian Calhoun wasn't there long enough to deserve.
He had one season, but my God, was that one season special?
It was a special season. So maybe like Michael Bennett has some argument to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stick with my boy Calhoun, because he was my boy, and he coaches back in the Milwaukee area now too. So I love the guy. So we
love Brian Calhoun. He was on the show a couple months ago. Great dude. We're personally we're personally big play John Clay guys here.
Yeah, so John Clay was great too, man.
But is it easier to protect a quarterback who's a statue or one who scrambles too often?
I would say the scramble guy for sure, because even though like he's probably going to get hit more, and there's going to be plenty of times where he's outside the pocket and your guy's probably hitting him and you didn't realize it. Like, that's not your fault. So as an offensive lineman, you realize very quickly there's a line in the sand and there's a binary thought process with being a lineman. That was either my fault or it wasn't. And you have to just keep your mind in that little small box. And when you have a quarterback that runs, it really makes the defensive lines cautious with their pass rush. So they're not going to be as creative leaving their lanes of rush to try to get to the quarterback. So it makes your job a lot easier versus when you have a statue back there, like those dudes are pinning their ears back and they're getting off the snap, and they know it doesn't matter if they leave their gap because that guy's still going to be standing exactly in that spot. So all they have to do is get to that spot eventually and they're going to win.
All right. And last one, toughest teammate to block at Wisconsin, toughest guy to block in the NFL.
So toughest guy at Wisconsin was probably Rasmus James. I was a freshman when he was a senior. He ended up being a first-round pick that year of the Minnesota Vikings. And I think he was maybe even the defensive player of the year in the Big Ten that year. He had a great season, great player. But in the NFL, it was probably Dwight Freeney. He was the guy that made me lose the most sleep at night because I would just be thinking about that spin move and I would be seeing it over and over again. Just like when Bernie closes his eyes and he sees sheep jumping over his bed at night. Like I would see Freeney doing spin moves over my bed at night. And it caused me a lot of lost sleep going into those games against the Colts. So I think definitely Dwight Freeney. He's actually up for the Hall of Fame this year too. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope he's a first ballot guy.
Should be.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sorry I was late. These LaGuardia, the flights are crazy. I just want to say right the football, Joe Thomas signed football and Barry Alvarez Hall of Fame football. is gracing my daughter's room right now.
Right over her bed. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Right over. You can see it's right here. It is here.
Beautiful.
There it is.
I love it.
I have you, Barry, Ron Dane, and Bo Ryan. That's all I got.
Amazing, baby.
And,
a true honor, my friend.
It was a true honor playing with you. It really was. And being your friend, which I have stories that we are not going to tell you.
That'll be the Believe in Madison After Dark version.
Yeah, that'll be for the Patreon feed. So, all right, guys. Well, listen, Joe, we cannot thank you enough for stopping by. Reminder, check out betonline.ag, our presenting sponsor. And until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, guys. Thank you so much for having me. And Bernie,
thank you.
Thanks for being a great teammate, buddy, and an even better friend, man.
I appreciate it.
I can't wait to break some bread with you, buddy.
I can't wait. I'll try
back in Madison someday.
I'll try to get up at 5 o'clock to come to one of those Lyft groups.
Dude, I can't wait to get you in our Lyft group, buddy.